Okay.
Not sharing the screen yet.
Yeah, thank you. One of these days I'll get my act together in terms of having Zoom running at the same time as everything else. Okay, I'm gonna share now. All right, can everybody see my PowerPoint screen?
I can.
Great, thank you. Thank you all for coming and welcome to the Howard Astronomical League June meeting. We've got a lot of cool stuff and a really cool, amazing set of a couple of speakers here. So without any further ado, I'll just show you the agenda for tonight. Go through some introductions, a few announcements on club business. Our speakers, we have a trip report. Grace recently returned from an astronomy tourism trip to Namibia, and depending on time, she may give the highlights or the thorough report. And then we have our regular features about what's going on in the sky and in shallow sky and out in outer space observatories with Wayne and Jim, although Jim is not here. So I might pick up the shallow sky. And then we'll go through some images and wrap things up. So, oh, I almost forgot. Introductions. Is there anybody here that's new that would just like to introduce themselves or say hi, or any new club members?
First time at a meeting. I joined just recently. My name's Anil.
Anil? Okay, welcome.
I'm a returning member from 1990s, and just like to get active with HAL again.
So you were here right at the beginning, 1990s. That's
Yeah,
when HAL
yeah.
started. Wow.
Yeah. Significant other.
Great. Welcome. Welcome back.
I'm my first meeting.
Mike, all right. Great. Thanks for coming. You guys steeped in or newbies to the hobby?
I've been a lifelong amateur astronomer, and I mean very, very amateur, but I've always had an interest in it. So
Cool. Well, the club is the right place to be. There's all sorts of stuff you can learn and share, and our members like to do that. So welcome. Okay.
This is Tom Teacat. I've been in the club for a while, but haven't been active for a long time.
All right. Welcome. Tom, you said?
Tom Teacat. Thank you.
Okay. Hey, by the way, Wayne, my computer here is like my screens. If somebody puts something in the chat or raises their hand, can somebody tell me? Because I can't, the way my computer's set up, I don't see the PowerPoints over the Zoom. So I'd appreciate that if somebody could do that.
Okay.
Thanks. So announcements. Our favorite thing to talk about is star parties. So we just had a really good one. Next one coming up is on the 6th of July. And oh, that helps. I got the right glasses on now. Yeah, we have a members coming up on the 6th of July and then the 13th of July public. Hopefully it will not be as hot as it's going to be this weekend. Upcoming events, we have the solstice. Today is actually the longest day of the year. So hip hip hooray. But bad for us astronomers, because unless you're a solar guy. I always used to feel unhappy in December because it was get dark so early. But now that I've become an amateur astronomer, I'm always happy in December. Anyways, So an event that's happening this weekend is the Astronomy Festival on the Mall. It's always a weekend around the solstice. I'll talk about that in a slide or two. We've got some HAL people going there. Full moon is coming up, strawberry moon, which like many things in astronomy derives from cultural references and whatnot. In this case, this is the moon at which some Native Americans in the Pacific Northwest, I believe, decided it was the indicator it was time to pick their strawberries. So that's where that name comes from. Also, what's more interesting to me as a deep sky guy is the new moon will be July 5th. So that's when I'll be itching to find dark skies right around that week. Planets, not much going on right now. It's just really early morning. I'll talk about that when we do, or Jim Tommy's slides will talk about that. But in the pre-dawn hours, it's Saturn and Mars, and Jupiter just barely is coming up before, just before sunrise. And then the other upcoming event is, and I just sent an email about this to the club, it's Observatory Cleanup Day. So depending on which day is better for more people, if you guys can just reply to the email I sent today, if anybody's interested in helping cleaning up the inside, we got to do a little bit of maintenance on the dome, et cetera. It's generally a kind of a just hang out, fun day. Maybe we'll buy some pizza or something. Okay, that's it for that. I mentioned we just had a public star party, and it was a pretty good one. We had 27 members come out with their telescopes. A lot of new members were bringing their gear out and setting up. Phil Whitebloom was the host. He told me that he counted over 100 cars in the parking lot at some point during the night. So I think, and he also estimated, although with 100 cars, I've got to believe that maybe 250 is low, but he estimated over the course of the night, we had like 250 people come out and spend some time with the club. So you can see in the upper left-hand corner is Phil's doing his thing. Anyways, that was a good time. The other thing that's happening is this weekend, 2 days from now, is the Astronomy Festival on the National Mall, where you get to go and set up your scope. It's the longest day of the year. A couple of museums are open until midnight. There's generally people around at the late hour. I see a couple of our volunteers here in the room. Thank you. I know it's this particular one, I guess I just got an email today about the weather, the heat dome, and so they're moving the early part of it to indoors, and then we can, after 8 o'clock, we can move our stuff outside. Anyways, so that should be fun. I'm gonna bring my kid and let them run around. If anybody wants to volunteer, I think come talk to me after this, or this is my first time doing this, so next year we'll know more about it and I'll give more advance notice. That seems like something fun to me. Okay, and then next on our agenda we have Book of the Month. So Crystal, are you online?
Yep, I'm here. All right, so hello everybody. In case you're new, my name's Crystal Rowland, and I run the Book of the Month slide, and I also manage our club's library. So this month, I decided to try to go for a little bit more of a challenge. So today's Book of the Month is Observer's Guide to Stellar Evolution by Mike English. This 2003 edition is part of a Patrick Moore's Practical Astronomy series that covers a wide range of observing guides and other topics of interest to an amateur astronomer. As I said, my goal this month was to go for something a little more advanced that might be intimidating to a newcomer to the hobby. So stellar evolution might sound like a super technical topic, but it's a fascinating subject of the life of stars, from how they form, how they live, and ultimately how they die. So I picked this one kind of up at random. It's a more recent donation. I have some mixed feelings about the quality of the book overall. To start with some of the positives, the author does cover essential topics, things that you may have heard of, like the HR diagram, the proton-proton chain, etc. That while using that accessible language for a really general audience. There are multiple tables and there's star maps for reference. If you're not interested in the math, the equations and laws, they're all isolated to gray boxes that are separated from anything like the main paragraphs. But I will say that the book suffers from two weak points that I think could disinterest certain readers. So the first thing is what I'll refer to as a lack of magnitude. So I found that when I was reading this, there were phrases that were coming up that were unhelpful throughout multiple sections. Saying something can be many times smaller or many times larger is kind of doing a disservice to someone who's trying to understand the scale of the objects being discussed in that passage. So this would usually be an opportunity for an editor to step in and highlight some of these issues. Using language that is too vague or repetitive just isn't helpful. There are some other areas that become really rapidly technical without giving the reader any time to absorb the new information. So I think at only 255 pages, it feels like there's very specific passages that were condensed or maybe poorly edited. The second thing's a little nitpicky, but it is the absence of a glossary. So an index is not a substitution for a glossary, especially if you have like this plethora of new vocabulary. There's a lot of new technical language, and it builds upon itself throughout the whole text. So again, not having a glossary can be a little intimidating, a little frustrating for someone who's new to the hobby. I think this, again, should have been something an editor or reviewer could have recommended. So overall, I think the book is far from beginner friendly and is likely going to lead to some of those frustrations for those just starting out. That's kind of why I rated it more for the experienced astronomer. I recommend finding other sources if you're new to the hobby or just astronomy in general. However, I will say that if you feel comfortable with a lot of the basics, like you understand the magnitude of stars, distance scales, things like this can still serve as a helpful guide. There's still a lot of information in it that's very helpful, that's insightful, but it is pretty dense. So it is definitely not a coffee table read. It's definitely something that you would go into if you're a little more on the experienced side. So that is the Observer's Guide to Stellar Evolution. Like I said, this was a more recent donation, so if you're interested in checking it out, you can come see me at the next star party, or you can email me and I can find a time to get the book to you.
That's awesome. Thanks, Crystal. Hey, one question, why is it like usually when you talk about stellar evolution, you're not really observing it. Is there something specific about why they called it Observer's Guide?
Yeah, so the intention was that the audience was for someone who's like, a amateur astronomer who's interested in viewing different stages of stars. So the entire text kind of highlights like, oh, if you would like to see a example of this kind of star at this kind of stage, or if you want to demonstrate why stars have different colors, here's a star that looks red, here's a star that looks white, here's one that looks more bluish, and here are the reasons why. So it does scaffold the star maps intentionally to kind of give you like, here are examples of things that you're already looking at as an observer, but now I'm going to give you some of the science behind it.
Cool. That's pretty cool. Thanks. I think I might check that one out. Look at some of these really red ruby stars and learn more about what I'm looking at, ones that I like to look at. Okay, well, thank you so much. So moving right along, we next have our speakers. So Sam, you were there. If Sam and maybe Chris, if he's made it.
Yeah, we are both here.
Yeah, we are both here.
Terrific. So thank you guys for joining us. Sam and Chris are the founders of the World According to Sound podcast, which started as a series of small podcasts and has evolved into an award-winning in-depth set of audio programs. And their philosophy is intentional regarding communal listening, and a way to reclaim autonomy in a visually dominated world. I'm not going to read the rest of it because I think you'll get it. You'll get it as we go through. So I'm like super thrilled to have them here. So if you guys would like to share your screen.
Sure.
Yeah,
We don't have any,
we don't have
being
any
audio
visuals.
people. Yeah, being audio people, we have zero visuals. But well, yeah, first, thanks for having us. Yeah, we're excited to share the show with you. I think some of you may have listened, but what we thought tonight we could do is sort of give you an overview of the show and what we were trying to do with it. And then we were thinking of playing one episode that we could listen to together. Yeah, and then open you up for a Q&A. So Chris, I don't know, maybe we should start.
Yes.
You want to start by telling them the story of how we did this series and what the intent-
just like sort of like what our connection to astronomy is, because we are not astronomers. Sam and I were both in the liberal arts in college, and we've been making audio and radio, public radio, for a long time. So astronomy isn't even our sort of thing, but we have in the last 2 years been working a lot on a lot of like humanities work, and specifically with this project, we were kind of interested in this intersection between, you know, the hard sciences and the humanities, basically, and that's kind of been what all of our work has been kind of going towards, and what this astronomy project, which we called Cosmic Visions, which is about 9 episodes about astronomy, but each one looking at this sort of a scientific topic through a humanities lens.
Right. And as Chris said, like you all probably know a lot more about astronomy than we do. You know,
I'm sure
I took an astronomy course in college.
So did I.
Introduction to an astronomy course, yeah, and that's about my. But the little that we did know, so actually, we've been working with universities to make these series about the humanities, and we were approached by Johns Hopkins. And when they suggested the idea of doing a series on astronomy, Chris and I were really excited because it's, you know, we knew enough to know that it was like a really great topic. And we really approached it all as, you know, for someone who really kind of is interested but doesn't know a ton, how could we create a series that is not reductive on the scientific points, but that could sort of let everybody in. And the structure of the series really was to think of all these moments in the history of astronomy where something that somebody might think of as non-scientific has been a major a factor in a great discovery or a new way of thinking. And the episodes march chronologically, you know, going from...
The first one is about the moon, and it's really a sort of focus on moon, you know, mythology throughout cultures, you know, spanning as far back. I forget when the first one was that we used, but I don't know, 2000 BC or so, all the way up kind of to a sort of, you know, modern time. We have an episode about Babylonian astrology. We have an episode about the Greek sort of cosmic, you know, the beautiful order, their idea of what cosmos meant. And then we get into a lot of like modern stuff. Oh, the Mayan, a whole episode on like the Mayan zero and how they use, you know, how they use sort of astronomical predictions and like their social, you know, structures. And we have like we have sort of medieval stuff like Kepler. What else did we do?
Kepler, we did a piece on Dante. Yeah, we really tried, and every piece it focuses on sort of one sort of domain of astronomy. So in the moon episode, obviously the moon, the Mayans, we look at the predicting the periods of stars, and then we, you know, all the way up to the final episodes about gravitational waves. Yeah, and I mean, we're not astronomers, we're not scientists, so we're not, you know, we could talk to you about the episodes and some of the scientific content, but really the bigger point is that astronomy, I mean, all the sciences are a combination of different skills, of, you know, skills from the hard sciences and things you associate with the humanities, but astronomy in particular, because it's so distant from humans, has long been has required people to be very creative about how they gain knowledge about it. And so the series really talks about, okay, you know, you go back to ancient man, you know, here's the thing that's very important, right? The movement what you can observe in the sky is essential for survival. It's essential to know the rhythms of animals that you want to hunt, and then later in farming. But it's a thing that you can't touch. You know, it's so intangible. So the series is really about the creativity of humanity to figure out a way to understand this thing that they can't touch and do experiments on, and to really figure out sort of, you know, not figure out how it all works because we don't know that, but figure out ways to understand it better, understand how the movements of the heavens relate to what happens on Earth. Yeah, and well, I guess, I mean, we want to leave room for you guys to ask any questions. We wanted to play one episode for you all. I mean, unless everyone's already listened to everything and doesn't want to hear an episode. So I don't know if there's a way for people to chime in. Is that, yeah.
I think that would be fine. That would be great.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, 10 minutes. It's not super time intensive. So yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, maybe we'll play an episode and then we'll have more specific things that we can talk about. And then also if you have any questions, yeah. And Victor, can you share screen so we can play an episode?
I guess I can.
Oh, you can.
I believe so. I'm doing it now.
So we have a lot of our mission as amateur astronomers is in regard, as you may have picked up from the earlier slides, is regarding public outreach, education, kids and whatnot. And it's always interesting to me that when you're at a star party, there are people who love the facts and the science and the numbers and the detail. And there are other people who come to star parties that are interested in the stories and the mythology and the constellations and whatnot. So yeah, everything you just said is I think it resonates with us at least with me as an amateur astronomer.
Oh, great. Yeah, no, when you reached out, it seemed like there was definitely an alignment of the missions. Well, great. Well, we're going to play an episode. And actually, I mean, if you're at home listening, you might want to put headphones on. I mean, it would sound better. Definitely not a requirement. But we'll give you a second for anyone who wants to put on headphones.
I like this particular one. I really like this one.
Oh yeah,
oh, great.
This one's a little wackier.
It's a connection I never made. And I also remember when I was a little kid, a bunch of books on my dad's library about Dante, like his life. So, which I never read.
Yeah,
well, yeah.
There's.
Oh, go ahead. No, go, Chris.
I was going to say, like, so that this episode will kind of show it, but there's this undercurrent too in the series of like how sort of important. I mean, terminology here is difficult, but like how monumental or how important traditional scientific ways of thinking have led to major breakthroughs in science. And so it's like this sort of notion of like this steady march and progression of science towards some goal is like something that we were trying to debunk a little bit throughout the whole series. And this episode I think is a good one that really kind of encapsulates that idea. Should we start, Sam?
Yeah.
Let's cut you off. Oh.
No, that's great.
So I think I shared the sound. I'll start it. If there is no sound, Sam, you can tell me if I've done something wrong.
Great.
Here we go.
Ways of Knowing.
We have sound.
Great.
Season 2, Cosmic Visions. Episode 8, Dante's Universe. In the spring of 1964, a large, relatively new radio telescope in New Jersey was behaving oddly. No matter where it pointed, the telescope registered a low-level signal. The signal was constant. Astronomers Robert Wilson and Arno Penzias were determined to figure out what was going on. The telescope appeared to be working fine. There were no mechanical issues or electrical problems. Then they noticed the excrement. The telescope was covered in pigeon droppings. They scrubbed it clean. The static persisted. The static was not from pigeon droppings. It was from the birth of the universe. The radio telescope was recording cosmic background radiation, remnants of energy released by the Big Bang. This is the actual sound of the cosmic background radiation recorded by the telescope in 1964. It was a huge moment, the first time humans had made a direct observation of the origin of the cosmos. The observation of cosmic background radiation proved a curious fact about our universe. Namely, wherever you look in the sky, you're gazing inward, back in time toward the point where it all began. This feels counterintuitive. If you go outside and look up at the sky, it doesn't feel like you're looking in at something. It seems more like you're looking out into space, out at a vast, limitless universe. Isaac Newton popularized this perspective in the 18th century when he described the universe as flat and stretching out into infinity. Newton's view was still dominant when cosmic background radiation was discovered, but evidence had been growing against it. The first major blow is in 1915 when Einstein publishes his theory of general relativity. This theory links space and time and shows it could curve. In 1929, Edwin Hubble provides the first piece of evidence that the universe has a finite age and is expanding. Then in 1931, Belgian cosmologist and Catholic priest Georges Lemaitre theorizes that the universe began at a single finite point. Finally, in 1964, there's the first piece of empirical proof, the discovery of cosmic background radiation. But as scientists were making these discoveries, literature professors noticed something eerie. This new understanding of the cosmos happened to closely resemble the universe described by a 13th century Italian poet, Dante Alighieri.
Le parti sue vivissime ed eccelse, sì uniforme son, ch'io non so dire qual Beatrice per loco mi scelse. Ma ella che vedia.
This is an excerpt from the Divine Comedy. The narrator has just come out of purgatory and he's gazing up at the heavens. Everywhere he turns, he feels like he isn't looking outward at space, but instead inward, back in time, toward the same point, the beginning of creation. God. This description of the universe is remarkably similar to what would be observed in telescopes some 600 years later. Just replace God with the Big Bang. William Egginton first learned about this similarity when he was a graduate student in the 1990s.
What I wanted to find out at the time was, well, why? Why this eerie coincidence?
As Egginton would soon find out, it wasn't a coincidence at all. In Dante's time, this was the common understanding of the universe. In fact, the idea had already been around for 2,000 years.
This tradition went way back into 600, 700, 800 years before the birth of Christ. And so someone like Dante at around 1300 Common Era has a close to 2,000-year history of thought, in which he's steeped in order to come up with answers to this question.
What exactly are you seeing when you look up to the heavens? Egginton is now a professor of English at Johns Hopkins University. He's traced the roots of Dante's conception of the universe back to the ancient Greeks.
Hoti desti to hueneka en tois akinetois, hediairesis deloi.
In 350 BCE, Aristotle conceived of the universe as a series of crystalline spheres. Each one carried a planet, and they were all nestled in a final sphere called the prime mover. As it moved, it caused all the other spheres to move, like a hand turning a crank on a giant piece of clockwork. The prime mover is the equivalent of the modern Big Bang or the Christian God, the beginning of it all. A lot of these ideas from antiquity began to slowly recede from Europe in the Dark Ages, but they were preserved and built upon by Arab scholars like Ibn Rushd, also known as Averroes.
يقطع المسافة المتناهية في زمان غير متناهي فإنا نحس الفلك يقطع بأسره.
Averroes described the universe as a circumference surrounded by its own center. So when you looked out, you were looking in toward the center of the cosmos and the beginning of creation.
كل واحد منهما صاحبه في زمن متناهي.
These ideas filtered back into Europe in the time of Dante, who was an avid scholar. Eglinton says he definitely would have been familiar with these concepts as he wrote the Divine Comedy. In 13th century Europe, this view of the cosmos wasn't just held by erudite scholars, but everyday people who were exposed to the ideas in church.
Moderns like us, we tend to look out at the sky the way we might look out over a lonely moor and see the world outside. Medievals did very much the opposite. They would look up and out into the sky, but they would have the sense that they were looking in at the dawn of creation, at the origin of creation.
This is exactly what was confirmed in 1964 by the discovery of cosmic background radiation. It might seem like pure chance, but Eglinton says it actually makes sense. Aristotle, Averroes, Dante, medieval Christians, they didn't have the technology or physics that we have today. What they did have was a similar cosmology. They believed that the universe was finite and that there was nothing outside of it. They were looking at the problem in the same way as contemporary scientists.
Which is, how do you account for the existence of a finite, real, concrete universe here in the present in which we are there, and at the same time, you can't stand outside it on some kind of a pre-existing or external platform to describe it. And once you set that set of constraints for yourself, you end up having to curve space.
You need a universe that curves back in on itself, a universe that is surrounded by its own center. You need to have a universe where you're not looking out, but looking in, back at the start of it all.
Poscia che incontro alla vita presente di miseri mortali aperse il vero, quella che imparadisa la mia mente, come nello specchio fiamma di doppiero vede colui che se n'alluma retro prima che l'abbian visto in pensiero, e se rivolge per vederse il vetro, gli dice il vero, e vede che s'accorda con esso come nota con suo metro, così la mia memoria si ricorda che io feci riguardando nei belli occhi, onde a pigliarmi fece amor la corda.
Cosmic Visions is made possible by the Alexander Grass Humanities Institute at Johns Hopkins University. It's produced by the World According to Sound as part of our series Ways of Knowing, audio works dedicated to the humanities. The series is edited by Alan Montesilio, music by John Bartman, and our friends Matt Moose. Thanks to Valentina Giedi for reading Dante, and to Hannah Baba for her reading of the Arabic text. The World According to Sound is made by Chris Hoff and Sam Harnett.
Intorno al punto un cerchio d'igne si girava sì ratto, che avria vinto quel moto che piuttosto il mondo cigne. E questo era d'un altro circumcinto, e quel dal terzo, il terzo poi dal quarto, e dal quinto il quarto, e poi dal sesto il quinto. Sopra seguiva il settimo sesparto già di larghezza, che il messo di l'uno intero a contenere.
Thank you for asking us to put our headphones on. That was wonderful.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, it's a lot nicer with the headphones. Right. It's like you're just more sucked into it.
Well, thanks for listening.
Anyway, yeah, thanks for going through that with us.
So I'll let you, we want to know any questions you have about that piece or about the whole series, but I thought it might also just tell you a few of the reasons we were really drawn to this story. I mean, I think the first thing is that if you don't know anything about astronomy, when you look up at the sky and as a contemporary person, most people do feel like they're looking out and not in. And that's just such a simple, like when you realize that it's like you're actually looking back in time as it gets farther away, and that you actually, looking back towards one point, like it really kind of it requires a giant leap of your brain that I think is like one of those things that's so cool about astronomy. And one of those things that once you start learning more about it and making those leaps, it really, it really draws you in. So I think that was like I think it really made us want to do the story. And then also this thing that really does seem like a coincidence. You have this famous Italian poet who happens to describe the universe in a way that a telescope then shows, gives proof that it is that way. It just seems like a crazy coincidence. But then the more you look at the story, you realize, oh, this is actually a question of cosmology, and trying to solve a problem where, if you don't have an infinite universe, as the person in the story, Egginton, says, this is the solution. It has to sort of be circled by itself. Even though the two, what we know with physics now versus the Christian view are very different, the fact that there's overlap in this cosmology, we thought was a really interesting point. Dana, sorry, do you have a question or comment?
I do. I'm curious to know, do you guys know, when did we start flipping our view from those ancients thinking that one way to?
I think, unless we got it wrong in the story, it seemed like it was like Newton was a major sort of, he had it wrong, and he was like the major force of spreading this infinite abyss sort of view.
Right.
Yeah. So Newton, which I forget what year that is exactly, 18th century, but yeah.
But I would also think that it was probably a slow progress as we started to look out a lot more, like as we started using telescopes and sending spacecraft out, like in the public's imagination, I bet it was a slower shift to this general feeling that it's going out instead of in.
I imagine the telescope was very much a proponent of that, because you are kind of like,
Yeah, exactly. And then you just keep looking farther and farther. And once you start to realize the vast distances, it sort of feels inconceivable that it could be going backwards. One thing I would actually, Dan, I'm glad you brought that up, because the other thing I wanted to say is also why I was drawn to this is that Newton's contribution to science is so huge and powerful, and he was so right about so many things. Like it's this monumental moment for humanity. But in terms of cosmology or understanding the shape of the universe, it kind of put us on this wrong track. This idea of this sort of flat, infinite, and I guess I like this idea that science, it doesn't go just linearly forward. Like we have these great breakthroughs, but then all of a sudden, like it could cause you to reassess a different thing, and it's not just this like forward progression. There's lots of times where like even a great thing kind of puts us on a wrong track for a little bit.
Right.
So I thought that was
like one of the greatest thinkers or scientists sort of set us back 2 centuries in a way in this one area specifically. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting.
Well, and also, I mean, maybe too is just like this idea that we have so much more information given, the advances in science and instruments, but understanding like the nature of the universe still requires, it's not like a totally rational endeavor. Like you can't wrap your head around it. I mean, a lot of the scientists that we talked to in the show were like, we work on black holes, but I need metaphors. I need ways of thinking about things that are kind of non-scientific to wrap my head around it. And I'm someone who works, with data and has all this, kind of rational information about these things, but I still have to think about it in a kind of non-rational way to sort of make sense of it. The shape and scale of the universe, I think, is a really maybe the biggest or best example of something you just can't wrap your head around. So sorry, Chris, I've been talking a bunch. These are the things I don't know if you want to add anything, or and also if anyone else has any other questions while we're talking to you, please feel free.
Yeah, I can't, if you have your hands up or if you're in the chat, I don't see that. So please just chime in.
Yeah, just start talking. That's fine.
Chris, for you, yeah, actually now re-listening to it 6 months after we made it.
Yeah, it wasn't half bad. I was not cringing. There's always a fear that you hate the thing. It was pretty good. Yeah, no, I think the series, I mean, and the stuff with astronomy, I mean, kind of piggybacking on what you're saying, I'm really drawn to this, just this like idea of abstraction. And there is like, I'm just more and more convinced, maybe it also has to do with like getting older or something, but there's like there's like a finite limit, I think, to what human brains can really comprehend or like really get your head around. And like, sure, if you're like the black hole person and your degree of like mathematical understanding is super high, that like it really helps you, I think, maybe bring some of these abstractions down. But in the end, like, I don't know, there is this like the I'm just saying, like, to me, there's certain limits to sort of rational thinking and rationality. And I think I put a lot of faith in like rationality, but it's like there's a lot going on outside of that sort of world that is like making us understand things and just like deal with things in the world. And that sort of nexus is really interesting to me. And like astronomy really brings that out, kind of like what Sam was saying. I mean, just the ideas of distance or whatever, like it's so unfathomable. Like I cannot get my head around any of that stuff.
And there's lots of, I mean, some stories that didn't make it into the podcast. I think a lot about Einstein and his work and his, the cosmological constant. Like he has this sort of fudge factor that he puts in to sort of to make it work. And then he thinks of that as being kind of very unscientific. Like, okay, I'm just putting this in because I want it to work. And then decades later, it's sort of proven correct. And again, that's like another story of like, we think of Einstein and the importance of his contribution to science. It's way more than just being very good at like conducting experiments or doing math in a very sort of like what you're taught is really the sciences of like data. And it's really about this kind of expansive, creative, imaginative thinking, doing something like as clearly wrong as putting in a fudge factor. I mean, that seems like the most unscientific thing out there. But science is filled with stuff like that. It's filled with creativity. It's filled with making mistakes. Putting your faith in something that maybe seems unscientific to see a thought through. So I thought, again, in doing this series, it was interesting to look back at a lot of that history. Another episode that really gets at that idea in a different tact is the episode on aliens. There was a lot of really good scientific work done by people who believed they'd seen evidence of aliens. I mean, the example we choose to do the story on is this whole period in the late 19th century where a bunch of astronomers really believed they were seeing canals on Mars. This guy Schiaparelli drew these maps of Mars, and he had these lines, and a lot of really prominent astronomers thought, oh, these are canals. There's a advanced life on Mars, and so they study Mars really intently, and they start studying other planets. And they're wrong. I mean, clearly they were wrong, but it ended up spurring all this great scientific research, and they were actually also brought in a lot of money, because the public got fascinated, and so money flew into, to all these projects to examine the planets and build telescopes. So science is really, I guess, again, the biggest takeaway from the series is that science is a very messy human endeavor, and that means it's, creative and imaginative, and then, having this other part of our brain that's like rational and data oriented, and it really takes both. Sorry, Chris, did you want to?
Yeah, no. Well encapsulated.
Oof. Rarely get a compliment like that from Chris. Compliments are stingy.
I have a little different view on Newton.
Okay.
Great.
He was stood on the shoulders of giants and gave us the laws of motion, which were the on-ramp. He actually gave us the on-ramp to both special and general relativity, but there were things that he couldn't do in his time. But Einstein picked up on it. Just add the constancy of the speed of light, and that came from Maxwell's equations, which were way after Newton's time, and trying to incorporate those into Newton's laws, there was a problem. And so Einstein solved that with special relativity.
Mm-hmm.
Mechanics is in a way a revision of Newton's, not a
Well, yeah,
dumpster dive.
but Newton didn't, I mean, he believed in that,
He believed in the constancy of,
yeah, exactly. So,
but he also had a problem with his own theory of gravity that he expressed as spooky action at a distance. How can this happen? Something happening over here and affect something over there instantaneously. And Einstein picked up on that. And since the constancy of the speed of light comes out of special relativity, this required some revision of physics some more. And that eventually led to general relativity.
Mm-hmm.
So he really gave us the on-ramps to both of Einstein's famous theories.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good point. I mean, like as I said, Newton's place in the history of science is so important. Yeah, I think the point we're trying to make is that
he was also an alchemist,
right?
Was the speed of light known at Newton's time? I don't think so.
Oh, they were starting to measure it.
Yeah, but
Rover measured it in 1600 something. But
so yeah, I mean, I don't think he would have even
eclipses of Jupiter's moons.
Right. No, or they, people were doing stuff with candles and things too. But
oh yeah, Galileo tried to do that.
But I think that the whole point, I think, is that with Newton's laws, they're actually accurate to almost to the speed of light, right? So
yeah, they're accurate within certain limits.
So during his time, he had no reason to doubt that.
That's right. There was no way.
That's how it was. It was only until we were able to measure things much more precisely and measure the speed of light and things like that you needed something different than the Newtonian laws.
Newtonian mechanics, yeah. It's 3 laws.
I don't remember when the speed of light was finally measured and when, but I think
it was around the time.
I don't know that part of it. Yeah,
because Galileo was a century or so before that, and wasn't able to do it.
Right. I mean, they didn't have
the mountains a couple of miles apart. That was never going to work.
You needed actual observation.
You needed microsecond
and timing
for that.
Well. Again, just I think again a great point to not villainize Newton in any sense. I mean, I think the bigger point really is just that there is this shift, and I do think that what Dana was saying, what Dana asked, I really do think that the sort of general person's impression that they're looking at took a long time to develop, and probably had a lot to do with.
And this is a never-ending story because we know that Einstein's theory is wrong too, because it doesn't work with quantum mechanics.
Right.
Right. Now we've got a dilemma similar to the one that led Einstein to special relativity.
Right.
Where the Newtonian mechanics and Maxwell's equations didn't mesh.
Right.
Until you had the right way to look at it. Nobody has yet found the right way to look at how to mesh gravitation with quantum mechanics.
Right. Yeah, well, these again, we are not astronomers or scientists, so the nuances of the scientific history is definitely above our pay grade. But these are all very
exciting. Will happen.
It always does.
Nobody knows when.
Well, we have like 5 or 10 more minutes. We could talk more about the series. We could answer questions. What would everybody? Yeah, what would everybody like?
What are you guys working on next?
Yeah, what are you doing in the series?
Oh, we're actually almost finished with the next thing, and it's actually quite related to the astronomy series. It's at a whole, like a very long piece about the sort of role of metaphor in science. Again, it's sort of another scientific and humanities series. This is really like specifically looking at metaphors and how sort of pervasive they are in science and scientific discovery.
Yep. Yeah, it's a collaboration with the University of Chicago. They have an institute there. It's called the Institute on the Formation of Knowledge. And as Chris was saying, this is another episode it's kind of looking at the history of science. At the same time, looking at like linguistics and how humans rely on metaphors, all the time, and basically in every single sentence that you utter, there's usually a metaphor hiding around there somewhere. And the question is, how do they play a role in the history of science, but also in the scientific process, like, you know, the way that scientists conceive of experiments, the way that they communicate their results. We're very excited about that one. It's unlike the astronomy series, it's going to be a 2.5 hour kind of audio documentary with like 3 chapters. So it's more like kind of like a very highly produced audio book. And that's supposedly going to come out in 2 weeks, although we're not done yet. So
We're almost done.
Where can we find that? Can we find that on your website?
Yeah, that'll be on our website. Or if you guys do listen to podcasts, you can just find us under Ways of Knowing. You subscribe to us there, and then when it comes out, you'll just get it.
Yep.
Yeah, that one should be. Yeah, that is a like history of science romp. There's all kinds of. It's not astronomy specific. Do we have any astronomy pieces in that one actually?
No,
I think we do, which is weird, right?
Well, I think we don't because we did
so many
12 episodes before,
Yeah.
so maybe we were feeling a little.
But there's
like
lots of like biology, like evolution. There's just lots of stuff.
Yeah.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So as a club, we are generally a very visual focused group. We take astrophotography, you know, we look through
nice.
pieces, and so this is a treat for us to think with our ears instead of with our eyes.
Yeah.
If you were actually on that note, if you haven't listened to the show and you want to listen to one episode, the final episode is actually all about the sort of sounds of space, even though they're, you know, space is essentially a vacuum, and they're, you know, but there's like it's all these like sonic interpretations of space. So people who have sonified data, who have like taken data and turned it into sound, people who have pitch shift, who have shifted things in the human range of hearing. So like, you know, gravitational waves is maybe the most public example, where you can sort of hear the whoop of 2 black holes colliding. So yeah, the whole idea of that is what would it be like to sort of think about outer space through sound instead of the visual. So
awesome. I really enjoyed in the very first episode when you had the woman reading from the ancient Sumerian poems. It was crazy to me to think that, you know, I'm listening to words that were spoken so long ago.
Oh, cool.
That was kind of, I don't know, that was kind of moving to me.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, the funny thing about that, Chris and I, we assumed that Sumerian was one of those languages that people had no idea what it sounded like. But yeah, we found out that actually it's more recent scholarship where they've been able to make pretty decent guesses of what the language actually sounded. And we found the woman who read that for us, but she's one of very few scholars who can actually read Sumerian texts.
Yeah, that was cool. All right, anybody else have any other questions? Well, I'd like to say thank you very much to our speaker.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's nice to talk about this stuff with interested people. Yeah.
You're welcome. You're welcome to stick around and listen to the rest of the meeting. I know if you have got other things to do, you can go and take off. But thank you again so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. I'll turn my camera off. Okay.
Warning, the rest is mostly visual.
Got it.
If I can figure out how to bring the menu that I want up. Oh, look at that. It's right where we left off. Okay. So next, we have some description of a trip to Namibia. Grace, I think we have time if you want to go through all of your stuff.
Sure, thanks. Can you hear and see me okay?
I'm sharing my screen. I guess I shouldn't have even bothered to
Well,
share.
I'll share my screen. Just give me a second. And share. Can everybody see my screen?
We do.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thanks for this opportunity, Victor. So I have some slides describing a trip I took last month to Namibia. It was intended to be, and it was, a night sky photography tour, but it was also an opportunity to do some daytime photography. So you'll see some of those photos as well. It was an 8-day tour overall. Let me go to the next slide here. Excuse me. And for those of you who are not familiar, Namibia is in the southwest corner of the African continent. Essentially, it's just to the northwest of South Africa itself. It's to the west of Botswana. It lies right on the Atlantic Ocean, and it's to the south of Angola. The climate, certainly where we were, was very much desert focused. In the north, there's more sort of diverse habitats, but where we were, lots of desert. The trip was originally to be led or taught by Alan Wallace. Those of you who have an interest in night sky photography may have well seen his videos on YouTube, and he really wrote what is truly the Bible of this field called photographing the night sky. And if you have any interest in this field, I would highly recommend it. Unfortunately, at the age of 34, he passed away 2 months before our trip was due to be held. He had lymphoma and had been battling that, but I gather he also suffered an infection and passed away unexpectedly. One of his good friends was actually a fellow member of this group as another tour member, and he sort of spoke eloquently of what a remarkable life Alan had led, and of course, what an influence he's had on astronomy. So you can see here kind of a map of where we went in this 8-day tour. We started in the capital of Namibia, a town called Windhoek. One thing you'll notice is a lot of the place names in Namibia are Afrikaans, which is a variant of Dutch, because for many decades, South Africa and by extension the Dutch really ruled Namibia. It only became an independent nation in 1990. But today it's a thriving democracy. So I'll go through each of the spots you see with black dots in them in the slides here in just a minute. Since this is a question that always comes up when you do night sky photography, what kind of gear was I using? I was really using my standard rig, which is a Nikon Z7 that's been modified for full spectrum, 20 millimeter Sigma lens for Sony cameras. I have something called a Mega Adapt ETZ21 adapter, which allows you to use lenses like this, which are not available, for night sky photography on the Nikon platform. And then just a Benro pano head. And, the different shots have different exposures, but, this is a pretty general guide. Typically, when I shoot, it's 10 to 13 second shutter speed. Much more than that, I tend to start to get some star trailing, so you're trying to maximize that. Because I had an f1.4 lens, I was shooting usually at f1.4 to 1.8, and the ISO generally was somewhere between 4,000 and 6,400, give or take. Okay, so let's talk about where I actually went on the trip and the photographs I was really privileged to take. So the first place we went is a place called the Quiver Tree Forest. And quiver trees, that's the photo you see in the upper left, are actually kind of plant or a succulent plant. There was an ancestral sort of peoples of modern Namibian sort of Aboriginal tribes or people called the San. And they had a fascinating sort of cosmology of the Milky Way. There was a sort of a creator god named Kung, and he had instructed, the peoples of Earth, the San, to be kind to each other and be kind to animals. Humans being humans, we fared not so well at that. And fire started to consume the earth until a young woman, who's not named, picked up the embers from that fire and flung them into the sky, thus creating the Milky Way. So, pretty remarkable origin story. Different people have different perceptions of what quiver trees look like. I sometimes tend to be overly imaginative, so I sort of drew a connection between this and an exceptionally large and angry head of broccoli with a bit of an ego problem. But that may be just me. But you can see sort of photos of the Milky Way taken at various parts in this park. The skies were extraordinarily dark. Bortle 2 to Bortle 3 at most. I don't think we ever got to true Bortle 1, but definitely Bortle 2 and beyond. So the Milky Way was very vivid in a lot of locations. The next night, we went to another park relatively nearby called the Giants Playground, an evocative and poetic title.
Great. So these are all your photos?
Yes, all of these are my photos.
Awesome.
This was one of the most remarkable nights. It's named the Giants Playground because as you see in the picture in the upper left, there's these sort of rectangular brick-looking boulders, and they're huge. I mean, these are, several feet across in size. And the idea was it's called the Giants Playground because they appear to have been dropped by giants, or again, with my imagination, maybe they were used by extraordinary disorganized druids trying to make another Stonehenge, but I could be wrong about that too. Some nights when you're doing astrophotography, I'm sure this is the experience of many people here, lots of things go wrong. But then sometimes you have a night where just everything lines up, the stars literally align, and everything goes right. And that was this night. The conditions could not have been more perfect. This is one of the darkest places we visited. And the photo you see in the upper right there is a panoramic shot of, the arc of the Milky Way. So that's probably 9 or 10 horizontal shots that were later stitched together in Lightroom. And then in the lower left there, between those two trees, you can see the core of the Milky Way, which, as many people know, is actually the center of the galaxy. And if you're into Milky Way photography, this is, I suppose, the big prize in some ways. And it's really only visible from about March to September in most locations, depending on your latitude. So it's not something you can see all year round. And then the pictures at the bottom are really close-ups of the core of the Milky Way, taken with, on the left, sort of dolerite boulders, and the other two pictures, quiver trees. So, I would love to claim credit for, the vividness of the core of the Milky Way in these pictures, and I certainly process these images, but honestly, sometimes you just get lucky. There aren't clouds, the sky is clear, you're there when the core of the Milky Way comes up, and you get some really good shots, or at least shots that I feel very positive about. Go ahead.
Could you see the lagoon? Sorry, could you see the Lagoon Nebula naked eye? Could you detect it?
I honestly didn't look. That's a good question. What you can see, if you look in the the photo on the upper right, you can see below the arc of the Milky Way, you can see sort of something that looks like a vertical puff, right? Sort of about halfway down.
Yeah.
That is the Large Magellanic Cloud. And that is not visible to my knowledge in the Northern Hemisphere. So that is definitely visible to the naked eye. Of course, as we all know with Milky Way photography, the Milky Way looks more dramatic than it does with the naked eye because, your camera's just capturing a lot more photons with a lot more spectra. But even with your naked eyes, it's an experience. I've read that 80% of the people in the world have never even seen the Milky Way because of light pollution. So there's a way it feels almost like a privilege or a luxury, to witness, the majesty of the Milky Way for lack of a better term. Okay, moving on.
You also see the small Magellanic Cloud if you look towards the center bottom.
Yeah, you're right, down here.
Down there.
Absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out. So, like I said, conditions that night could not have possibly been more perfect. And sometimes you just have to give thanks to whatever cosmic force in the universe you tend to give thanks to for giving you those opportunities. That's certainly how it felt to me. The third night was interesting. We went to a place that was kind of more towards the coast, not on the coast. That came later. Called Duisub Castle. So one of the unfortunate parts of Namibian history, it was the location of the first genocide of the 20th century. The Germans massacred or starved to death nearly 100,000 Aboriginal Namibians. So they really ran Namibia for many decades. And this castle was built by, let us say, a highly unusual individual. I don't have his name handy, but he decided for whatever reason in 1909, the thing to do was to basically build a European German medieval fortress in the middle of the freaking desert. And he had the money to do it because he married some American heiress. So she was probably as madcap as he was. One sign of this was he called himself the Baron, although he was not a member of any nobility. And then there's a tale, which I don't know if it's anecdotal or proven, which is he once rode his horse into Windhoek, the Namibian capital. Apparently, he was trying to cross a river with his horse to get there. And so he decided to take off all his clothes and bundle them up so, they wouldn't get wet when he crossed the river. However, he lost the clothes in the river. And so therefore, he probably marched on to Windhoek in his undies. So that may give you a little sense of what kind of individual we're dealing with. So you can see pictures of the castle there in the upper left, and then you can see a picture we actually took from, or I took from the roof of the castle in the middle there, which sort of shows the whole medieval sort of tower keep thing. Down in the bottom left, you can see sort of a corner of the sort of one corner of the castle with the Milky Way in the background. Then, the one that has the most vivid Milky Way in some ways, or similar to the largest portion of the course, is one sort of with the tree in front. The shot that, speaking of luck, honestly, when I'm shooting Milky Way, probably everybody knows this. A third of it's planning, a third of it's photography, and a third of it's post. Post with Lightroom or Photoshop or whatever tools you happen to use. And I certainly do that too, to really highlight and bring out the core of the Milky Way or adjust the color balance or whatever. But sometimes the gods just smile on you. So the picture in the upper right of the windmill with the core of the Milky Way behind it, swear to God, that thing is almost entirely unretouched. That's how it came out of the camera.
Wow.
And yeah, that does not happen all the time. It doesn't happen most of the time, right? You're futzing around with this control or that control in Photoshop to really, emphasize things. But sometimes, you can't really take credit for it. You get lucky. And in this occasion, I got lucky. Okay.
What are the durations of these?
Pardon?
What is the total duration?
Of the shot? This one is probably about 13 seconds. This is not stacked. It's a single image.
Oh, these are single images.
Yeah, I have a few that are stacked, but actually very few of them. Most of them, well, for one reason, if there's clouds in the sky, stacking doesn't really work because frame to frame, the clouds move and that screws up the stacking. I mean, not always, but generally. So, and honestly, for these shots, because the sky was so dark, the Milky Way was clear, I have experimented with stacking some of them, and I may have a few stack shots in here, but a lot of them didn't really benefit from it that much. That a single shot was good enough. In fact, if you're interested, there's a group on Facebook called, I think, single shot or single photo Milky Way, which is one I belong to, and I've posted there, which is non-stacked, non-tracked, non-blended images. It's one shot or at most a panorama of single shots stitched together. And, there's some extraordinary photos there, that don't require some of those more advanced processing or photographic techniques. Okay. The next one, I have a few shots now that are actually not of the night sky. These are daytime photographies shots, but are some of the most remarkable places we went. This is one called Deadvlei, again, Afrikaans. This is where some of the tallest sand dunes in the world are. Literally, there are some that are almost 1,200 feet high, and they are this vivid shade of orange to red, not just sort of beige, but, very striking as you see in the upper left. The attraction, however, is if you climb up some of the dunes, and yeah, that's a hike. But assuming you made it, and I kind of barely did, you get to the actual sort of Deadvlei place within the dunes. And what it means is dead marsh. So what's remarkable about these trees is some of them have been dead for 800 years, and they haven't rotted. They didn't fall over. They're sort of still clinging to essentially the clay lake bed below them because the climate is so arid. There's so little rain there that they just never rot. So you're really seeing, antiques from the 12th century still standing. This is a huge tourist attraction in Namibia. There were tour bus after tour bus there. So we got there like at 6 o'clock in the morning when the park's still open because by 8 o'clock it was just overrun. But, remarkable to look at. Okay.
So you had a good guide that you had a guide that knew all that stuff and knew when to be where you needed to be.
Indeed, we had a wonderful tour guide named Richard. And of course, he was having to improvise to an extent because Alan wasn't with us. You know, he was not a photography expert to the extent of Alan. I mean, who is? But he really picked the locations and, you know, provided excellent support. And there was also a junior tour guide named Colandre, who was a lovely lady who helped us with that. In fact, actually, come to think of it, the photo in the upper right is not mine. Colandre took it because, you know, we were there in the Namibian theoretical winter, right? You know, Southern Hemisphere. The theoretical winter there in the middle of the desert is still in the 90s. And I was not doing so great at, you know, doing long treks in the afternoons there. So I simply gave her my camera since she was going out to sort of do a scouting mission and said, could you take some photos for me? And so I took the one in the lower left. She deserves the credit for the one in the upper right. She is not a particularly experienced photographer, but she has a remarkable eye. You know, I told her that afterwards. So that was, you know, another incidence of kismet. Okay. So this slide is simply of desert wildlife. In the bottom right there, you can kind of see a picture of the, sort of a road through what a lot of the desert looks like. So some of the desert there looks like the kind of dunes you saw in the prior slide. You'll see another slide with something like that. But a lot of it, if you've ever been down to the Four Corners, like Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, or Death Valley, it's scrubland, basically, right? There's sort of little scrub bushes, but it's a very arid territory. But there are animals that thrive there. To my mind, the most majestic one are called the gemslots, which are kind of oryx, which itself is a kind of antelope. And so you see three pictures from across the top. I mean, those are just, you know, 3 foot or 4 foot, you know, vertical horns or antlers. Those are just extraordinary. The one on the left actually was taken at the resort we were staying with. You know, I had my sort of toes in the water in a nearby swimming pool. And, you know, right outside there was basically just, you know, desert scrub. And the gemslot came up to within 20 feet of me. And so I was able to, this is actually just a photo from my iPhone. But that tells you something about what wildlife is there. In the bottom left, you see a similar animal called the springbok, which has shorter curved horns. But, you know, and, you know, there's all kinds of other animals there. There's ostriches and, you know, extraordinary birds and so on. The sort of wildlife animals you think of like zebras and lions and those things do exist in Namibia, but those are in game preserves in the northern part of the country. And we were principally, as you saw on the map, in the southern part of the country. But still, you know, a lot of these are roadside photos, which, you know, which tells you something. Okay. The next one, I think this is the last purely landscape or daytime slide, is of a coastal town. And actually, it's the major seaport for all of sort of Southwest Africa called Walvis or Walvis Bay, which actually means whale bay in English. When we first went there, sort of the big attraction were the flamingos. By the way, if you don't know it, does anybody know what a group of flamingos is called?
Yeah.
It's a flamboyance. I am not making that up. So I put a couple of individual shots of what's called the greater flamingo, which is largely white and larger. And then to the right of that, the pink flamingo or the lesser flamingo, which is sort of pinker in color and somewhat smaller. But, you know, there were thousands of them right on the seashore flocking at the bay. So lots of photos there. The one on the right was a creature we encountered when we started to drive towards the dunes. And you see some pictures of those below. And it's called the Namibian sand gecko, which mostly lives in the sand. I don't know how our tour guide, we had a specialist sort of guide and driver for this part of our tour, but somehow he knew where to sort of basically dig down and find himself a gecko. And, you know, they're extraordinarily sort of multicolored creatures, and you can see how tiny they are, but just extraordinarily beautiful. And then down at the bottom left, you see pictures of a place we went to called Sandwich Harbor. On the left-hand side, you see a picture of the harbor itself. But one of the things that is striking about Namibia is that in many places, the sand dunes go right up to the ocean. There's not like some big beachfront and then there's dunes behind them. The dunes literally come right up to the water. And you see that there. So we did a lot of driving through the dunes and took pictures and so on. But, you know, again, kind of a remarkable experience. Okay, back to the nighttime stuff. So the next place we went was a town, not sure if I'm going to pronounce it right. I think it was Goanakantes, which was, believe it or not, this sort of resort, like this camp resort in the middle of basically a lunar landscape. You can see what that looks like in the daytime in the upper left. Like honestly, if you had a moon buggy there, it would probably fit right in. And then there are a couple of pictures there down on the bottom left is a sort of nighttime panorama. And then on the upper right was sort of a zoomed in close-up of the windmill. I found the windmill interesting artistically because it was missing one of its blades. And I'm always interested in photos that show you something that looks a little unexpected. Okay. Now to the place that I think was the most remarkable of the entire tour. And we spent 2 nights there, and this was the end of the tour. And it's called the Spitzkoppe Mountains. It's not really a mountain range. It's really only about 4 or 5 mountains. And there's no sort of foothills that lead up to them. Literally, there's the flat, it's called the Namib Desert floor, which you see here is just sort of sandy and flat. And the mountains literally look like somebody bought them somewhere else and decided to plunk them there, right? It's kind of extraordinary. And they're this beautiful orange reddish sort of granite color. So that's a daytime photography. That was literally taking out sort of the front door of the cabin I was staying in. That was not a trek. That's what you saw. Sort of we were situated between these mountains. And then there was the nighttime photography. So the photo on the, and Richard, our tour guide, of course, deserves credit. In fact, he lived in this area for years. He was a professional guide and climber. So he knew these mountains like the back of his hand. And, you know, for that, I can only feel gratitude. On the bottom left, you see one of the sort of most scenic things I've ever photographed, which is called the Spitzkoppe Rock Arch. And you can see that the Milky Way sort of rises and the core of the Milky Way rises above it, but you can also see the arch, you know, kind of like you see in some of the southwestern states there, but it was just extraordinary to shoot. And then there is the place I liked best, which was on the last night of the tour. So, you know, in all the other locations we were shooting, I was not alone. There was, I think, 5 of us who were members of the tour, and plus Richard, the guide, who were shooting in various locations. So, you know, sometimes we could spread out, sometimes things were a little bit jostly, but, you know, it was all good. But the last night, and I don't know how he knew, I never said this to Richard, but he elected to take me somewhere nobody else was. And that's what the photo you see on the right of the Spitzkoppe Rock Pond. I was the only one there. And it was a perfect night. There was a gentle breeze. It was utterly silent. There's the Milky Way above me and this glorious reflecting rock pool below it. So allow me to get philosophical for a moment. I know we have other ground to cover here, but sometimes I'm guilty of this at times. You're so busy photographing the Milky Way, you're not really experiencing the Milky Way. You're not really looking or, you know, ingesting the Milky Way, for a lack of a better term. This night was different. You know, one way to look at Milky Way photography is to say the prize is the photographs. Yeah, sometimes. But maybe there's another perspective, which is the prize is you get to do this at all. You have the privilege of being out there, you know, among our universe, among the stars, having an opportunity to witness majesty. I really don't have a better word for it. And so the photo on the right, which is a single shot, it's not stacked, was that experience for me. It was, you know, I'm guessing some other people in the audience appreciate this. We all find our own places for our Zen moments of happiness. Well, these are mine. So I'll just share one final photograph, which is actually the last photograph, or most precisely sequence of photographs I took before I packed up for the night, and indeed packed up for the entire tour. It's at exactly the same location as the photograph you see in the upper right, but it's a time lapse. So this is, I think, probably 20 to 30 minutes of photographs. And then I used a software program called Star Trails to combine them together. And the reason I think of all the photos in the trip, this one speaks to me the most, you know, is, as I said, there's something about this location that tells you about time. There were rock cave paintings in the general area that had been created by the San people 4,000 years ago. You know, the Spitzkoppe Mountains themselves weren't thrust up out of the ground. They were the product of 120 million years of erosion. You know, double that, and it's how long it takes the sun to circle the Milky Way. So it gives you a different perspective, not just of space, but of time. And it felt important to me to take a photograph that reflected that, and, you know, made me think a little bit of that anonymous, you know, girl in San mythology who flung the embers into the sky and created the Milky Way for the rest of us, for me. And so, that was the abiding memory that I left the trip with. And that's the end of the slides. If there are any questions, I certainly welcome them. But that was the presentation. And thank you for listening.
Thank you. That was amazing.
That was great. The pond story is amazing. I don't know if you had to throw out a couple frames on this picture, but I can't believe you didn't throw a pebble in that pond at least once.
I really didn't feel the urge, sincerely. I understand that, but this may sound a little elaborate. I don't mean it to, but I felt transfixed, right? I felt privileged to be there. So there was rock walls on each side of that photograph. Maybe I should share I think you can still see my screen, and you can see that. And so for this last part, which is like basically half an hour of just, automated sequential shooting, right? Set your intervalometer for 13 seconds, keep shooting for half an hour, and presto change it. But what that means is you're not spending time behind the camera. You don't need to. It's doing the work itself, which means you can decouple yourself from your camera and just experience where you are and what that felt like. And, everybody has their own idea of what feels religious or holy to them, whatever someone's faith might be. This was my church. I'll leave it at that.
A very lovely Zen moment. I love it.
Thank you, Dwayne. I know we have other ground to cover. I don't know if anybody else has any other questions, but as I said, thank you sincerely for being an audience for this. I'm glad I had the opportunity.
Thank you. That was excellent. We're using the right half of our brain. Whereas we usually use the left half. There's a lot of arts and in that presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Victor. I genuinely appreciate it.
Okay, so I'm going to share once again. Thank you for that terrific report. And then we'll get back to what we normally do and talk about shallow sky. Jim is not here, so I will just briefly go through this and let Wayne get up on the stage. But basically, it's all about Saturn right now in the early morning. And this is, I wish Jim was here because he would do this much better justice than me. But I found this pretty fascinating that the shadow of the rings is very discernible now that as the rings close up here, that you can really see the shadow of the rings on the planet as a really distinct line, whereas it's kind of not so easy to see that. And the other thing that Jim points out, and by the way, there's on Jim's a link on our website to Jim Tomney's blog if you want to hear the more detailed version of all this good stuff. You can find that on the website. But the other thing about the fact that the tilt axis of Saturn is starting to align with the rest with us is that we'll get to see some transits just for the same exact reason. Normally they're well below or well above the plane of the ecliptica that we would be in to see these occultations or transits. Now you can see them from, I suppose this will probably be for another year or two. We'll be able to see some of these things, and Jim pointed out a few of them. Normally, we're used to seeing these things on Jupiter, but if you're an astute planetary guy like Jim, you can see them. They're smaller and less a little more subtle.
Are those times Eastern Daylight, or are they UT?
That is a good question. I don't know. That's a good reason to do a little more research yourself. This is the teaser. I don't know. Yeah, it could be. You know, you can just hang out for 4 hours waiting.
I wouldn't be saying AM, saying 24 hours.
Yeah, probably, right. Yeah, so it's probably Eastern. But anyways, I think this would be pretty cool to see. Okay, so again, apologies for Jim for not doing justice to his slides, but he couldn't be here. Wayne, would you like to go?
Sure. So I want to talk today about a discovery of a black hole from the GAIA mission. GAIA was launched by the European Space Agency in 2013 from French Guiana, just as JWST was launched in 2021. The mission is to investigate the origin and evolution of the Milky Way by conducting a census of 1 billion stars. That was the mission. They've already actually conducted the census of well over 1 billion stars. So they've certainly met that mission milestone. And the way they're going to do this is to create a 3D map of the Milky Way with both positions and the space velocities. So they're going to measure the positions, the proper motion, that is the motion along in the plane of the sky, and they're also going to measure the radial velocity of these stars, so the velocity towards or away from the sun. And so they're going to have both positional and velocity information for all these stars. The spacecraft orbits the sun at the Sun-Earth, or orbits at the Sun-Earth L2 point, excuse me, just as, again, JWST does. It's not at the L2 point, but it orbits the L2 point. The spacecraft has 2 identical imaging instruments, taking pictures from which the astrometry is measured. They have 2 photometers where they get brightness information of all the stars, and they have 1 radial velocity spectrometer to measure the motion in the line of sight of all the stars. So I just went through all that. They measure the positions, brightness, and radial velocity of stars down to about 20th magnitude. So it's not a big telescope, but they can actually reach very faint stars. And the positional accuracy is as good as 24 micro arc seconds. So think about that one for a minute. Okay, next slide. So this is a black hole discovery, but I should tell you that there have been previous black holes discovered from GAIA data. Back when their data release 3 was studied, and they found evidence for 2 black holes, which they very creatively named BH1 and BH2. And they, through their analysis of the astrometry and primarily the astrometry, they determined that black hole number 1 has a mass of about 10 solar masses. So it's a very massive star. And black hole number 2 has a mass of about 9 solar masses. So they're typical massive star type masses, nothing terribly extraordinary. Then this new black hole, they've continued the naming convention and call it BH3. And this was found during the preparation of the data for their data release 4, which is, I don't believe, been released yet. And specifically, it was discovered while validating the solutions of binary star systems in the data. So the European Space Agency has basically a pipeline to look at the data and try to identify stars that have signatures of being part of a binary system. And when they find stars that have that kind of signature, they attempt to determine what the orbital period and the semi-major axis and all those orbital type parameters are, and the masses of the components from the data that they have. And so they were validating their pipeline processing, and they found this very unusual object. So they observed a star, and that directly observed companion star is a very low metallicity type G giant star. It has a magnitude of 11.2 in the GAIA G band, which is approximately like visual magnitude. and the distance using the Gaia parallax is about 590 parsecs or 1900 light years. So it's not horribly far away, but it's not real close either. It's about the distance of Deneb, a little farther, more distant than Deneb. It shows an orbital velocity or orbital period, excuse me, of 11.6 years. And the astute observers will notice that the spacecraft has hardly been up in space for 11 years since it was launched in 2013. So they have just less than a year's worth of observations, or I'm sorry, one period of observations. And the notable thing here is that the primary object is not visible by Gaia. Next slide. And so the observational data is shown mostly here on this plot on the left, where in the upper left you have the motion of the star relative to its mean position over the time period. So you got change in declination and change in right ascension as the y and x axes respectively. And generally speaking, the motion of the star goes from the upper left to the lower right, as indicated by that arrow in the lower left of that plot. The data points are shown by the black dots. The red line that you see is what they would expect to have seen from a single star at that distance, given Gaia and the Earth's orbit over the time period of the observations. And you can see that the star does not follow that predicted line. The blue line going through the data points is actually the result of applying the motion that they would get if their binary star model is correct. And it goes through the data points quite well. The upper right shows the residuals of the observations relative to the red line, the single star model. And you can see that the errors get as big as 15 milliarc seconds, which is almost 1,000 times their observation accuracy of 24 micro arc seconds. And so it doesn't fit very well at all. When they solve for the orbit, in the lower left, you have their orbit solution. You can, again, the data points are the black points. The blue ellipse is the result of the binary star orbit determination. The plus sign that's on the left-hand side of the ellipse, on the ellipse, that shows the point of periastron when the two objects were closest together physically. And the plus sign that's inside is the center of mass, the barycenter. So that's the center of mass of the combined two objects. And that line, dashed line, is the line of nodes, which is basically the plane of the sky. So the orbit is tilted relative to the plane of the sky, and that shows you where the plane of the sky is. And the motion here is around the ellipse counterclockwise, as given by that arrow. And in the lower right, then you see the residuals in milliarc seconds from the binary star model. And you can see that they are quite a bit better than the single star model, at well less than half a milliarc second. So if the binary model fits much, much better than the single star model. Okay, next.
And that's a much tighter scale you're showing there on the y-axis on that bottom right plot.
Yeah, milliarc seconds as a function of time. You see they have observations from 2014 to about 2020. Or a little over 6 years. Continuing with the observational data, again, remember they get radial velocities from these stars. And so here's the plot of the radial velocity as a function of time. And you see the black data points are the Gaia data points. And over on the right-hand side, you see a few colored points. Those are color-coded points. Those are ground-based observations they made after the end of the Gaia observations that they were analyzing. And again, you see that the blue curve is their model from their binary star orbit solution, and you can see it fits the data quite well. And so the analysis of the photometric and spectroscopic studies result that in a mass of this observed companion star to be about 3/4 of the mass of the sun. So it's a little bit lower than the mass of the sun, and it's probably a giant given its distance and its magnitude, apparent magnitude. And if you combine the orbit solution and the radial velocity data with this stellar mass of the companion, they derive that the primary object mass is about 33, almost 33 masses of the sun's solar masses. So it's very much more massive than the previous two black holes that they had discovered. And that's what makes this one very interesting, because it's very massive. So next slide. So implications of the 32 solar mass object is that since it's invisible at only 590 parsecs, at that mass, it can't possibly be a normal star or even a close binary consisting of normal stars, because it would have to be way bright enough to see if it was a normal star. It's also inconsistent, with a single or a binary neutron star, primarily because you'd have to have a whole bunch of neutron stars to get it up to 33 solar masses. So the remaining possibilities are black holes, either a single black hole, a binary black hole, or a binary of a black hole plus some other compact object. And further study is needed to distinguish among these possibilities. However, if this is a single black hole, it is the most massive stellar black hole yet discovered in the Milky Way. And with that, I'm going to be done. Any questions?
So it's pretty much a slam dunk that it's a black hole there.
I think so.
So I guess when we talk about like the black hole at the center of the Milky Way, is that distinguished as something other than this? I mean, that's much more massive, isn't it?
Yeah, the black hole at the center of the Milky Way is millions of solar masses. It's a supermassive black hole, not a stellar mass black hole.
Stellar mass. Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. Cool. Anybody got any questions on that one? All right. Thank you so much, Wayne. That was cool. You got the other half of our brains going. So with that, I'll move to the next part, which is the members' Astro Images and in this case, videos. Do you want to talk to this?
Sure. I was fortunate to be able to get out and see the aurora. There was a lot of cloud cover that night, and so around, I guess I looked out. I knew there was a G5 class geomagnetic storm going on, so I felt like I had to get out and check, and it was all overcast, but I felt like I could see some red glow through the clouds, and so I set the alarm for 3, got up, and I was able to do this time lapse of what I saw for 2 hours there. These are the details of the camera. So but you can see I've got clouds coming in soon after I started the time lapse. But then it cleared, and there were lots of good aurora. And one of the things that really intrigues me that I haven't really found out, you'll notice the aurora seems to be propagating from left to right, west to the east. And I sort of remembered that from seeing an aurora many years ago. So I looked up my notes, and on that one, I saw them going from east to west. So I'm not sure what the physics is behind all that, but I found it to be interesting. And it's not something that I've seen in other time lapses.
Huh. Well, it's such a cool thing. I can't tell you how many times I watched this at home. I was just looking at Polaris and watching everything go around it and trying to figure out what, I think that's Cassiopeia and Cephas. And
yeah, Cassiopeia is at the lower right. Polaris is just above center.
Yeah,
might turn the lights out. I would have. It's fairly bright on my screen at home, but it's not quite so bright here.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do it one more time with the lights down here.
I like the last bit of aurora that goes across at the end with a little patch, just as the twilight's coming in. Just marches right across the field.
So cool. Thanks for sharing that. Is this is the frame from what you were talking about that you really liked?
I like this one because it looks like a tree's getting struck by aurora instead of lightning.
Nice. Okay, and whoops, that's not supposed to happen. Did not mean for that to happen. Okay. Next, we have a photo montage from Jim Tomney, who again isn't here, so I'll speak to it. And it's basically these are all his photos, just showing how the rings are tilting. And I guess next year they should be almost invisible, and then they'll start their tilt up on their cycle here.
The 2023, you can really see the shadow on the top.
Oh yeah, right. Like right there. Oh no, you can't see my mouse. Like yeah, like right up here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
See how it deviates from because the curvature of the planet, it deviates.
Yes.
Yeah. And the rings.
Yeah, I guess you can if you look closely. Maybe you can see them in the other ones too. Like maybe is that it?
Yeah.
Is that it there?
Or is that the C ring? Is that
Right.
the grape ring you're seeing rather than the shadow?
This right here where my mouse is? Can you?
No, lower than that. Right at the edge of right at the edge of the rings, you can see that's the shadow.
Yeah, I think that's the crepe ring, the C ring.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll have Jim answer that next meeting. Next, we have a picture from Harini. Are you here, Harini?
Yeah, I'm here.
Can you tell us about this one?
Yeah, so I took this at the Alpha Ridge Park. I took it for 66 minutes. This is the Whirlpool Galaxy. It has a magnitude of 8.4, and it's 31 million light years away from Earth. It's also discovered by Charles Messier in 1773.
Awesome. And this is with your sea star, huh?
Yeah, it's with my sea star.
That is so cool. It's very nice. And I think that 56, this was at Alpha Ridge Park?
Yeah, it's at Alpha Ridge Park.
Okay, terrific. Terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Hannah, are you on? So Hannah shared this. This is not what we typically show, but she had posted this to the Discord group, and I thought it was so cool. I thought I would share it at the meeting because it's 100 years old. This is a 3-minute exposure from a 24-inch doublet, I guess.
3 hour.
Oh, 180 minutes, not 180 seconds. Sorry, I'm thinking in my terms of what I'd normally do. Yeah, but from Peru. So I guess it's a plate that from the Harvard archive that Hannah was looking through, and she found this historical plate, and I think it's just amazing how awesome it is. 100 years ago today. Possibly. So yeah, it sure is. Good catch. Okay. Jared, are you online? Okay, well, this one is a lot more than 56 minutes. I know because I watched this picture evolve slowly on the Discord group as Jared collected more and more data. This is with his 5-inch refractor, and this is a composite of regular light with H alpha filters, and it represents several hours of light.
What is it?
It's M51 again. This is the Whirlpool galaxy. And there's a couple of NGC small galaxies up in the corner over here as well that are more like 100. I looked them up, and they're like 130 million light years away. Next we've got Brandon. Are you on? So Brandon did a chalk drawing of what he was looking at through the eyepiece at Alpha Ridge, and this is, what is this? I forget. It's down in the southern hemispheres. It's
M17.
M17. Thank you.
Swan Nebula.
The Swan. Yeah. So I think this is pretty cool. I love the hand drawn. I should have gotten an image of it and put it up next to it. Well, I like to see that. Next we have Jose, are you on? Another M51, looks like an M81, an M27. There's all sorts of M's going on here. And then the sunflower, I think that's the sunflower. So Jose is coming up to speed on his astro work.
Did he do those on the Sea Star?
I don't think these are, I think these are with his SCT. I don't believe these are with the Sea Star. I think he finally got his guiding issue resolved, and all these impromptus, he's collected some data over the last few weeks with his SCT. Yeah. Thank you, Jamie Corrigan. And then Stephen, are you on? Do you want to talk about these?
Yeah, sure. The one of M82 is showing the different filters, what you can get with 3 different filters and without a filter. It's quite a striking difference. And this, of course, is with a color camera, so it's these are the ultimate filter is a very narrow band filter. The extreme is a little broader, and the enhance is a much broader band for the H alpha and oxygen 3 lines. But you can see it makes a huge difference which filter you use.
Yeah, it's quite a bit more red up in the upper hydrogen.
Yeah, the red really shows up in the narrow band filters. And without using any filter at all in the lower right, you wouldn't even know it was there. Those are the starburst regions.
Cool.
Then in the upper right, that's the Pelican Nebula, and that is a case of combining 2 filters, the enhanced filter and the extreme filter. These are optolong filters. And this is with the 14-inch at f2 with Hyperstar. And the bottom picture is the Cat's Paw Nebula, so-called, which is at close to the meridian, is 13 degrees above the horizon, which at my house is about 3 degrees above the tree line. So I kind of like getting these things that are almost impossible to get in between the tree branches, and you have to get them at just the right time.
Nice, nice. Is your C14 on a pier, or do you have to lug it?
Oh no, it's on a pier. It's in a sky shed pod dome in my backyard.
Awesome.
So it takes me 2 to 3 minutes from the time I open the door to the observatory to the time I'm taking the first picture.
Nice.
It's after 60 years of hauling telescopes out every night. It's wonderful to have my own observatory in the backyard.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing these. That's pretty
Sure.
cool, the filters. And then we've got Wayne. Wayne, who I know is lugging his telescope out.
Yeah, this is M63, the Sunflower Galaxy, taken with my 8-inch Ritchie creation. So let's see, what is it? 5 hours and 44 minutes of exposure time in just LRGB.
Awesome. That's all from Alpha Ridge?
All from Alpha Ridge, yes.
Yeah.
2 nights, May 31st and June 8th.
Nice. Nice. All right. Jim, are you here? This is some spectacular astrophotography right here. I thought I saw Jim on earlier. Did maybe he had to leave. But this is well, we all know what this is. But
Veil.
this is, yeah, the whole veil, eastern and western. I think this is one I also like to soak up. It's amazing what he's done here, and I don't have the details of the capture, but he's definitely becoming one of the premier astrophotographers in the club. It's gorgeous. And he's also I need to learn whatever he's using for sharpening, because it's just amazing how sharp everything is.
I have to imagine he's not even using a telescope for that.
What is he using?
I think. How big is the veil? It's not. I mean, you can do.
So he has a Teleview NP101, I believe.
Yeah.
So it's maybe a 2 or a 3 panel mosaic.
Yeah.
Ah.
That's my guess. It's so sharp.
Yeah, the only way you can get the detail is if you're using
Yeah.
if you're doing a mosaic.
Yeah, I don't know what I don't remember what camera he has, but he's got a refractor. So yeah, this must be a mosaic, but I don't know. It's pretty amazing. I was looking at a Hubble photo of the witch's broom, and like zooming in on his little area over here, and he's got so much detail in this picture. It's just amazing. So, okay, well, that's the last of the pictures. So, and we're done with a little bit of time left. So I want to say thank you to everybody who came out, and I hope you enjoyed the meeting today. It was a little different than our normal meetings, and I think really I enjoyed it a lot. Thank you very much to our speakers, to Grace, and to the World According to Sound, and to Wayne and Jim Tomney for contributing. So I'm going to stop the recording now, and maybe we can just chat for a couple minutes before it's time to go.